Hi children, I am going to start a new lesson and the title of the lesson is Rights Approach to Development. Now let us start the lesson. In this lesson, we are going to learn about some of the important human rights and in particular Right to Information Act which was passed in 2005. In short it is called as RTI, Right to Information Act. It was passed in 2005 by the Government of India. And about this act we are going to learn in this lesson. And human rights are so important for human beings, for their survival as well as for their all-round development also, that all the countries in the world have granted these rights to the citizens of their countries. Irrespective of their caste, creed, religion and gender also, these human rights have been granted to all the citizens by all the countries. And these human rights cannot be denied to anyone. And when we talk about poverty, two of these human rights are very, very important. What are those two rights? They are right to dignified life and right to liberty and freedom. These are the two important rights related to poor people. Right to life means everyone has the right to live. Not just to live, but to live a dignified life. And right to liberty and freedom means that people can do or believe or speak out what they want without any fear. Freely, they must be able to express their views without causing loss of freedom for other citizens. This is called as right to freedom. And these two rights are very, very important for the survival of the poor people because they also are eligible for a dignified life. Now, in our previous chapter, we learnt about poverty. Poverty is not merely lack of food and being hungry. If one is not having food or he is hungry, it is not poverty. It is not merely lack of food and being hungry. Poverty means lack of resources like land or education. If someone has no land of his own or he doesn't have any educational qualifications, he is illiterate, that is poverty, because if people have land of their own, they can make use of this land as a resource and they can grow crops and it becomes a source of income for them. And if any surplus is grown, it can be sold in the market and they can take it as a source of income for them. And similarly, if people have education as a resource, they can get employment opportunities and which is also a source of income or livelihood for the people. So, poverty means lack of employment opportunities and it means lack of access to basic needs of life. Basic needs of life means education, health services, food, shelter, etc. These are the basic needs. And if people don't have these basic needs, that is called as poverty. If they don't have employment opportunity, that is called as poverty. And due to lack of all these resources, people don't have voice in many of the matters. That means no one cares what the poor people say. They don't have any voice in the matter means no one cares what the poor people say. And they also cannot influence any of the policies or programs of the government or implementation of these programs by the government. How can people come out of the situation of poverty? How can they get the basic resources and facilities to rise above poverty level? Now that is the question. It is possible with the intervention of the government. And very often people in the government feel that they are doing some sort of charity by providing different facilities and programs for the welfare of the poor people. Very often people working in the government, they feel that the government is doing some charity by providing all these facilities to the poor people. And they also feel that the money spent on such things is a burden to the government. But in fact, it is the fundamental right of the people to get all these facilities or welfare programs for their upliftment. It is their fundamental right. And when once this fundamental right is recognized, the money spent by the government on welfare programs, etc., will not be considered as a waste, but as a duty. If it is considered as a fundamental right, it is the duty of the government, it is the responsibility of the government towards people to provide all these facilities for their upliftment. And it will be seen as a necessary investment for the future of the country because people themselves are the future of the country. So whatever money is spent for the welfare of these poor people, that will be considered as a necessary investment for the future of the country. When the United Nations was formed in 1945, as you know, after the Second World War, on 24th October 1945, United Nations organization was formed to establish peace in the world countries. All the countries which became members of this UNO, they agreed that human rights relating to freedom and economic development are fundamental rights of all the human beings. These two rights, the first one is right to freedom and the second one is right to economic development. These two are fundamental rights of all the human beings, and many countries guaranteed these rights. Rights relating to freedom, they were guaranteed by many countries, but not right to economic development. Right to economic development means like employment, fair wages, right to access to education, health services, housing and food. These are all called as right to economic development. Many of the countries, they guaranteed rights relating to freedom to the citizens of their countries, but they did not guarantee the right to economic development. That means like employment, fair wages, right to access to education, these were not provided by many of the countries. But in 1993, once again, all these countries agreed that both these rights are essential for the survival of the people. Now, what do we mean by saying that these are the fundamental rights and these are the basic rights and people need these rights? When we say that people have a right to food, immediately it becomes the duty of the government to provide food to the people. And if we say right to education, people have right to education. It is the responsibility of the government to provide free and compulsory education to all the children. In the same way, housing, employment, if we say people have the right to health care facilities or housing or employment, it is the responsibility and it is the duty of the government to provide all this to the people. And the government should be legally bound to ensure this to all its citizens. Legally, the government should pass laws to provide these facilities or all these facilities which are required for their survival, for their upliftment, must be provided by the government only. And if they are not ensured, then the people can go to the court. Suppose these rights are not provided to the people can go to the courts to enforce their rights, to challenge it in the court, because these fundamental rights are protected by the courts. Now, they can demand, suppose these rights are not provided, the people can demand food, they can demand education, they can demand housing, medical treatment, etc. as their rights. And this is only possible if the government makes laws based on these ideas. The ideas which we discussed just now, based on these ideas, if the government makes certain laws and implements them strictly, then it is possible. And in the last few years, the government of India has made many such laws. For example, Right to Information Act was passed in 2005, right to employment, right to education, right to free and compulsory education to the children, 2009 it was passed. And in 2013, National Food Security Act was also passed by the government. Need for information to fight for corruption. That is RTI. The government system is very large and complex system. And in this complex system, it is very difficult to make sure that the policies and programs introduced by the government for the welfare of the people are being implemented properly or not. And even now and then, every now and then, the government is starting many new programs and introducing new policies for the benefit of the poor and backward people. But the benefits of all such programs and policies do not reach the people for whom they are meant. And often, the funds which are allotted by the government for such programs, they get diverted. And a major reason for this is corruption. You might be knowing what is the meaning of corruption. And nowadays, there is hardly any field where this corruption does not take place. And the main reason for this corruption to increase is that the common people, they do not have any information or idea about the programs of the government. what the government is going to do, what are the policies of the government for the upliftment of the backward class people. All these policies or ideas of the government or the programs of the government are not known to the people. People don't have any information about these programs or policies or about their implementation. So there is no source for common people to check how money or funds are being spent by the government on various programs. There is also no source for common people to check how money is spent on different programs by the government. Suppose a project is undertaken by the government to eliminate poverty and unemployment. People must know each and every details about how funds are being utilized, for which work, number of workers appointed, and money spent by the government on wages, for how many days the labor worked for to complete the project, etc., etc. And because, as you know, in a democracy, it is people's money that is spent by the government to carry out welfare programs. And it is the money that is collected from the people in the form of various taxes. As you know, tax is the main source of income for the government. So, it is the money that is collected from the people in the form of various taxes, and this money is again spent for the welfare of the people on various programs. So, it is the right of each and every citizen to know such information about the government's policies and programs and how they are being implemented, on which program the government is spending how much money. It is the right of each and every citizen to know such information. And earlier, such information about the policies and programs of the government, about the functioning of various government departments, it was provided only to the elected representatives. Elected representatives means MPs, MLAs. These are elected representatives. And only to these people such information was provided by the government departments to check the corruption. And if these elected representatives themselves are corrupt, who will check it? That is a big question now. Now let us see how this movement for passing this RTI was started in the beginning. A group of people in Rajasthan, they organized themselves under the banner of Mazdoor Kisan Shakti Sangathan. Under the banner of Mazdoor Kisan Shakti Sangathan, a group of people in Rajasthan organized themselves and they demanded information from the government. And there was no legal provision. Till then, there was no act passed by the government. RTI Act was not passed by the government by that time. There was no legal provision to take the details of information. And now, initially, these documents were collected with the help of officials. With the help of some government officials, they collected the documents and the information which they wanted. And people evaluated these documents through public meetings. And these documents were discussed in the public meetings. And thus, the movement began for the passing of this RTI Act. And very soon, the officials began to resist the idea of providing or disclosing the information to the common people. These government officials, they began to resist the idea of providing or disclosing, revealing the information to the common people. And this finally led to many rallies and marches by the people, demanding information about the functioning of the government. And for 3 years, people led many rallies, marches, and people demanded that information about government's policies and programs and also functions of different departments of the government expenditure on various programs is very important for their own welfare. People demanded that such type of information from the government is very important for their own welfare. And as government is supposed to work for the welfare of the people, people have the right to get any information from the government. The government is for the people, by the people, and of the people. It is formed by the people. It is elected by the people. So everything the government should do for the welfare of the people only. So it is the right of the people to know the information. And they also argued that such information about government functioning is crucial for the development of human beings and also to protect the democratic rights. And in a democracy, people can participate in governance. This already we know. In a democracy, all the people can participate in governance. And they can make sure that the benefits of the developmental programs reach the needy people. And this is possible only when They have information about the functioning of the government in the form of official documents. If they can get information in the form of official documents, then they can also participate in the governance and they can challenge it and they can check corruption. Only if the documents are made available to the people in the form of information. And if information is provided to the people, that means the government is transparent and nothing can be hidden from the people. And if the government is transparent, it cannot hide anything from the people. People can know each and every information. And this makes the government more responsible. Now the government becomes more responsible to the people. Now it becomes more accountable and answerable to the common people because the people have the right to question the government and the government has to answer. So it is answerable to the common people. It is accountable, more responsible, more accountable and more answerable to the common people. Also, it will help check corruption. So this type of information is crucial for the survival of the poor. And if any information is made available to the common people, arbitrary decisions by the elected representatives or the officials can be controlled. If this type of information is made available to the common people, arbitrary decisions means decisions which are taken illegally, not in a legal way. That is called as arbitrary. Oral decisions being taken by the elected representatives or the government officials, this can be controlled if people get this type of information from the government departments. And after many years of struggle, a law was made, making it compulsory to give official information. In the state of Rajasthan, it was first made in the year 1995. The first law was made in the state of Rajasthan in 1995, making it compulsory to give official information whenever it is required by the people. Now, during the next years, when one state led the way, immediately many other states also adopted the similar laws. In many other states also they made similar laws, making information available to the people whenever they require any information from any government department. And finally, this led to the making of our Right to Information Act. The Right to Information Act was passed by the Indian Parliament in 2005. And today, this right to information is recognized within the Constitution of India. Under two fundamental rights it is recognized, that is freedom of expression and right to life. Both together it is right to information. Now, provisions under RTI. Now let us see what are the provisions of RTI. According to Right to Information Act, any individual can get any information from the government departments which is in the form of documents like reports, advices, logbooks, email or any data or facts. The person who wants to get any information, he or she has to pay a small amount towards charges of making a copy of the document. For making a copy of the document, some charges are needed and those charges, these are minimum, are to be paid by the person who needs information from the government department. And people of BPL families, they need not pay any charges. For them it is provided free of cost. Now, to respond to the questions asked by the people about any information, in every government department there is an information officer. At the lowest level, in all the government departments, at state level and central level also, there is an information officer. Both at state level and central level also. And both at state level and central level also, above these information officers, there is an appellate authority. Appellate authority to make sure that action is taken. To see that, to check that this information officer is giving the required information to the people whenever they require. To check this, an appellate authority is there above these information officers at state level and central level also. At state level, this appellate authority is known as State Information Officer, and at central level, this officer is called as Central Information Officer. And these two state information officer and central information officers, they are again headed by SPIC, SPIC, State Public Information Commission at state level, and at central level CPIC. CPIC means Central Public Information Commissioner at central level. Now, if the information officer of any department at state level or central level, if he fails to respond to the questions asked by the people, immediately action is taken by the above authorities, that is appellate authority or the CPIC or SPIC. At state level or central level, action can be taken by these. Action means only they are penalized. Some fine is imposed, penalty is imposed on these information officers if they don't respond to the questions asked by the people. Now, according to this act, the government departments are supposed to provide the required information within the prescribed time, and they cannot hold the information for long time. If the information is not provided within the prescribed time, a complaint can be made to the higher officer, and a case can be registered at the state or central information commission. And now, since it is mandatory to provide any information about the functioning of any government department, according to RTI, now it is mandatory to provide any information about the functioning of any government department whenever required by the people. Because now it is mandatory, many of the government departments are providing information about basic aspects of their institutions without being asked also. For example, whenever a road or project is repaired or constructed by the government, you might have seen a notice board displaying the details of the public works undertaken. It is done by the Public Works Department, PWD. It displays a notice board showing the total expenditure incurred on the project, total number of workers who worked, and the time taken for completing the project, etc. And also in many hospitals you might have seen the notice board with the names of the doctors in charge of different branches and the timings whenever they are available in the hospital, and their contact numbers also are given there. Right to food and right to employment. These two rights help people to live with dignity. If they have right to food, if they have enough food to eat, and if they have employment opportunities, they can earn their own food, they can earn their own livelihood. So these two rights, they help people to live with dignity. And it is not because the government is kind to the poor and providing employment and access to food at reasonable rates. It is the government is providing these only because these are rights of people. These are the fundamental rights of the people. So it is the duty of the government to provide these to the people. Now, right to education. Right to Education Act, it was passed in 2009. In 2002, the Indian Parliament has recognized education as a fundamental right through 86th Amendment of the Constitution. And according to RTE, that is Right to Education, all the children between 6 to 14 years of age are entitled for free and compulsory education. And this law was finally passed in 2009. In 2002, the Indian Parliament has recognized education as a fundamental right through 86th Amendment of the Indian Constitution. And according to this right to education, all the children between 6 to 14 years group are entitled for free and compulsory education. And this law was finally passed in 2009. Right to Education Act 2009, Right to Information Act 2005. Now, Right to Education 2009. Let us see what are the provisions of this Act. It is the responsibility and the duty of the government to provide schools within the reach of the children. It is the duty of the government, it is the responsibility of the government to provide schools, that means to build schools within the reach of the children, and also to provide the infrastructure needed by the schools. what are all the infrastructure facilities needed in the schools by the children, it must be provided by the government. And according to their age, they must be enrolled in the classes. And providing appropriate facilities for the education of children with special needs on par with other children. If someone is backward in studies, he must be given some special training, specific needs on par with, to make him on par with the other children. He must be provided special training. And no child shall be liable to pay any kind of fee or charges. It is because it is pre and compulsory education, no fee should be charged from any child. And no test must be conducted for admitting the children into schools. That is also a rule. And no removal of name for any reason. The names of the children should not be removed from the school register. And no repetition of the child in the same class. And no child shall be subjected to physical punishment or mental harassment. The environment should be teacher-student friendly manner. The studies or the education must be imparted in a teacher-student friendly manner. No child shall be subjected to physical punishment or mental harassment. And admission shall not be denied or delayed on the ground that the transfer and other certificates have not been provided on time. Saying that some TC, transfer certificate, or other certificates which are required, they are not provided on time, the admission cannot be denied to any child. And only eligible candidates must be appointed as teachers, so that the education imparted will be of quality education. And the teaching learning process and evaluation procedures shall promote achievement of appropriate competencies. We should develop a spirit of competence among the children. And no board exams shall be conducted to the children till the completion of elementary education. And even after completing 14 years, though we are saying 6 to 14 years of age group, even after completing 14 years, the children can continue in the schools to complete their elementary education. Sometimes they are very late in admitting the children to schools. In such a case, the child will be of 15 years or 16 years, but he cannot complete the elementary education. So, even after completing 14 years, the child can continue in the school to complete his or her elementary education. And no discrimination should be shown. No discrimination or related practices towards children belonging to backward and marginalized communities. Backward classes or backward communities should not be discriminated in any matter. These are some of the provisions of the Right to Education Act, which was passed in 2009. And this Right to Education Act also declares that all children of the age of 6 to 14 years have the right to free and compulsory education. And the government has to make sure that sufficient number of schools are built, that too in the neighborhood of all the children. And it is the responsibility of the government to appoint qualified teachers and make all necessary provisions. All the infrastructure must be provided and all the other necessary provisions must be provided in the school. And this act also declares that the education should ensure all-round development of the children. The education should be imparted in such a way that it leads to the all-round development of the children. Learning through activities, discovery and exploration, child-friendly manner. It also states that the children should be taught in their mother tongue. That is also very important. Recently there was in our AP to make English as the medium of instruction. So children must be taught in their mother tongue only, and they should be free of fear and anxiety and must be able to express their views freely, or doubts freely. And in case there are no sufficient number of schools or sufficient number of teachers in the schools or sufficient infrastructure in the schools, or if the child is beaten or terrorized by the teachers or forced to study in unfriendly manner also, the children can complain to the courts against the authorities, because it is a fundamental right and it is protected by the courts. As usual, I am giving you homework. Read full lesson and underline all the key points and complete the blanks in the material.